Hello students, welcome to the MOOC course on Introduction to Sociology 2. The topic that we will discuss today is conflict and conflict theories. Now earlier we had studied a little bit about what conflict theories were, how it came as a reaction to the criticism, as a criticism of the functionalist theory. So today we will start by discussing the different definitions of different theories and how they kind of define the conflict in their own different terms. So let us start with George Simmel. In 1955, George Simmel defined conflict and said that there probably exists no social unit in which convergent and divergent currents among its members are not inseparably interwoven. An absolutely centripetal and harmonious group, a pure unification, not only is unreal, it should have no real-life process. Society, too, in order to attain a determinate shape, needs some quantitative ratio of harmony and disharmony, of association and competition, of favorable and unfavorable tendencies. So, he says that there always is an interweaving of simultaneous balance of the harmony and disharmony in any society. Next we come to Park and Burgess. In 1921, they said that conflict is a distinct form of competition. So here they mentioned the two terms, conflict and competition. They said that both these terms, both conflict and competition, they are forms of interaction. But competition is a struggle between individuals or groups of individuals who are not necessarily in contact and communication, while conflict is a contest in which contact is an indispensable condition. So if we say that there is a conflict between two individuals or two groups, there has to be compulsively a contact between them, which is not the case in case of competition. Now, social conflict, as most of the theorists argue, is always present in social life. There cannot be a society or a social interaction or a social life without the presence of social conflict. It is rooted in the social differences of class and status, of wealth and opportunity, of material interests, where scarce resources are unequally shared. Now, the resources that we have in our society are limited, but they have to be distributed amongst all. So, what happens is the demand is much more than the supply, and so these resources become scarce, and everyone, whichever class, whichever status, whichever stratification level they exist in, they all want to compete for getting these scarce resources. Now, what happens? Conflict as a result arises because there is obviously inequality in the society. 1968, Max Weber says that a social relationship will be referred to as conflict insofar as action within it is oriented, intentional to carrying out the actor's own will against the resistance of the other party or parties. So he calls it a social relationship, where one actor is acting out on its own will and the other actor who's interacting is against and keeps resisting. Thus, the social interaction of conflict is defined by the desire of each participant to impose his will upon the other's resistance. So, there is this imposition, force, coercion, which comes into picture. Now, what are the basic assumptions that these conflict theorists or the concept of conflict includes in itself? Firstly, as we have already discussed, it is a universal process. It is found in every society. Secondly, it is the result of deliberate and conscious efforts of individuals or the groups. It is not that, without any deliberation, without any conscious effort, suddenly a conflict begins. That cannot happen. Thirdly, the nature of the conflict is personal and direct. In conflict, the incumbents or participants know each other personally. Remember, we were talking about direct contact that is required in case of conflict. So it says this same thing. Fourthly, it is basically an individual's process. Its aim is not directly connected with the achievement of the goal, but is rather directed to dominate others or to eliminate the opponent. Whether I achieve the goal or not, that is a later issue. Firstly, it is for dominating others and in the process maybe eliminating the opponent. Fifthly, conflict is of brief duration. It is temporary and it is intermittent. But once started, the conflict process is very difficult to stop. It usually gets more bitter as it proceeds. Sixth point that is taken as an assumption is that it is a process loaded with impulsiveness of human emotions and violent passions. It gains force and then bursts open. Obviously, in conflict, we involve violence mostly, and it is a very impulsive human emotional reaction. Next, it may be latent or overt. In the latent form, it may exist in the form of tension, dissatisfaction, contravention, and rivalry. It becomes overt when an issue is declared and a hostile action is taken. So, we may be able to see the conflict as a manifest kind of action where there is a, real hostile action taking place, or it may be latent, which is there but not very visible outside. So what happens in this case? It is the dissatisfaction. It is the tension that is building up. It has still not come to the surface. It has still not been manifested, but it is there within. Next, it is mostly violent, as we have said, but it may take the form of negotiations, party politics, disputes, or rivalry. Now, these are non-violent means that is also being taken into account when we are talking about conflict. Mostly it does involve violence, but there are also ways and forms of negotiation, forms of, rivalry being settled, disputes being settled without a very passionate, violent kind of action. It is cumulative. Each act of aggression usually promotes a more aggressive rebuttal. Thus, termination of conflict is not easy. So, I become violent, I start a conflict, you give back conflict in return. And this goes on. So, it is very difficult to stop it then. It tends to be more intense when individuals and groups who have close relationship with one another are involved. Obviously, when you, for example, have conflict with your very close friends, with your family, then it is much more intense because you expect so much from them. You're closer to them. But when you have conflict with, say, a neighbor or a co-passenger, it does not go to that kind of an emotional, passionate level. Groups previously in conflict may cooperate to achieve a goal considered important enough for them to unite despite their differences. As we said, negotiations. It may emerge as a result of opposing interests. It is layered in a history of binary perceptions. So whether it is outsider or insider, us, them, these kind of binaries. And it has both disintegrative and integrative effects. It disrupts unity in a society and is a disturbing way of setting issues. A certain account of internal conflict, however, may serve indirectly to stimulate group interactions. External conflict can have positive effects by unifying the group. So now, let us briefly go through the forms of conflict. What are the different types of conflict? Firstly, group or corporate conflict. Simmel has distinguished 4 types of conflict: war, feud, litigation, and conflict of impersonal ideals. Next, direct and indirect conflict. Gillen and Gillen in 1948 talks about 5 types of conflict: personal conflict, racial conflict, class conflict, political conflict, and finally, international conflict. There are also other types of social conflicts like social movements, like riots and rebellions, civil politics, and revolutions. So, after we have seen that there are different forms of conflict, what is the contribution of conflict? What are its functions? Conflict determines the status of the individual in the social organization. Conflict is not always an unmitigated evil everywhere as it is generally assumed. It is a chief means of group contact, and it has played an important role in the development and spread of culture. Thirdly, conflict may eventuate in peace through victory of one contestant over the other. Conflict helps to define social issues and brings about a new equilibrium of contending forces. Conflict tends to stiffen the morale, promotes unity and cohesion within the group, and may lead to expanding alliances with other groups. Conflict keeps groups alert to members' interests. Conflict generates new norms and new institutions. It leads to redefinition of the value systems. Conflict within and between bureaucratic structures provide means of avoiding the ossification and ritualism which threatens their form of organization. According to the Marxists, conflict leads not only to ever-changing relations within the existing social structure, but the total system undergoes transformation through conflict. Conflicts between vested interests and new strata and groups demanding share of power, wealth, and status have proved to be productive of vitality. Conflict may lead to a new consensus. Conflict theorists like Koser believe that conflict is necessary for progress. They contend that societies progress to a higher order only if oppressed groups improve their lot. Now, there are certain negative functions which we call dysfunctions of conflict. So conflicts usually disrupt social unity. Secondly, intergroup conflicts makes it hard for members to agree on group goals or to cooperate in reaching them. It diverts the members' attention from group objectives. It often leads to group tension within the group. It may increase bitterness and cause destruction and even bloodshed. Conflict disrupts the normal channels of cooperation. So these were the negative kind of contributions of conflict towards the society, which we would call dysfunctions. Now there are several stages of conflict. So initially, the first stage is no conflict. There is no conflict. Then there is latent conflict or hidden conflict. Then there is emergence of the conflict. Then the conflict escalates, escalation of the conflict. Then it hurting. After that, it de-escalates, de-escalation of the conflict. It comes to a resolution or settlement, and then post-conflict peace building and reconciliation. This you will see through this particular diagram that the curve is rising, and then after hurting, it is coming down again. So this diagram of the stages would make it clearer for you all to understand. Now, after discussing conflict in detail, we come to the conflict theories. Talking about the conflict theories can be used to look at wars, violence, revolutions, and forms of injustice and discrimination by explaining that there is a natural disparity in society that causes these problems. Conflict theory is the idea that society consists of different classes competing over finite power and resources, which are scarce. Remember, I was telling you which was scarce, limited resources. It was first proposed by the German philosopher Karl Marx and grew out of his theory on history, notably historical materialism, the idea that a society's institutions spring from its economic structure. Conflict theory developed by Karl Marx purports that due to society's never-ending competition for finite resources, it will always be in a state of conflict. What are the main approaches to conflict? Firstly, on the basis of human nature and conflict, biological and socio-biological theories, instinct theory, Darwinism and social Darwinism, ethology, sociobiology, criticisms of biological and socio-biological theories. Next, psychological and social psychological theories. What are they? Freudian interpretation and psychoanalysis, social identity theory, the Seville Statement on violence. Next, society and conflict. Here, it includes the social process theories. Next, social structural theories. This includes structural violence theory, human needs theory, resource theory, relative deprivation theory, and socio-economic theories. Finally comes the formal theories. Now let us get into a bit of the detail of all these theories that were mentioned. First, on the basis of human nature and conflict. So these theories believe that conflict is caused by the human nature. Firstly, biological and socio-biological theories. These trace the source of conflict in human genes. They say they are inborn traits, and it focuses on the aggression part of conflict. In instinct theory, it says that aggressive behavior is rooted into the human instinct. Darwinism and social Darwinism talks about both survival of the fittest as well as natural selection theory. Ethology talks about the science of animal behavior in their natural habitat. Aggression in human beings is a result of instinct for aggression. That is what they argue. Next, sociobiology, science that focuses on the study of social organization of animals. What are the criticisms of biological and sociobiological theories? Firstly, anthropologists and sociologists argue that human behavior or human instinct cannot be traced to biological roots. It is more a product of human culture, which is created by human groups and passed on through social learnings. Social learning theories also stress that aggression has nothing to do with genes but is a product of social learning. We learn it. Gandhi did not see violence as a part of human nature. We all know about this part. Next, we come to the psychological and social psychological theories. These theories, they locate conflict in the minds of men, in their beliefs, in their ideology, motivation, perception, values, and so on. Some psychological traditions also focus on experiences of frustration that could lead to aggression. The Freudian interpretation and psychoanalysis argues that aggression is carried out in the name of self-preservation and is inherent to humans. Psychoanalytical theory, human beings start differentiating between the self and other from a very early age. This differentiation manifests itself in a deep psychological need for enemies. Next comes the social identity theory. Farfel formulated the social identity theory in which he aimed to answer the question why people favor their own group over others. The Seville Statement on Violence, it was written in 1986 for the United Nations sponsored International Year of Peace. It led to 5 conclusions. Firstly, it is scientifically incorrect to say that we have inherited a tendency to make war from our animal ancestors. Secondly, it is scientifically incorrect to say that war or any other violent behavior is genetically programmed into our human nature. Thirdly, it is scientifically incorrect to say that in the course of human evolution, there has been a selection for aggressive behavior more than for other kinds of behavior. Next, it is scientifically incorrect also to say that humans have a violent brain. Next, it is scientifically also incorrect to say that war is caused by instinct or any single motivation. And these were adopted by UNESCO in 1989. We now come to the society and conflict kind of theories. Here, they argue that conflict is caused by socio-structural or institutional conditions or nurture, not the nature part of the humans. So, aggression thus, they believe, is not inbuilt, but its expression is dependent on the factors outside the individual in social interactions and social processes and in the way society is organized. So what are these theories? Let us talk about the social process theories. Conflict and conflict resolution both are processes. One of the first ones to write about social processes was Adam Smith. Fabrics of relationships could lead to the emergence of principles, he argued, which could be applied to conflict resolution. Several theorists in the 20th century have paid attention to the social process theories. Park and Burgess related conflict to competition. We have already talked about this when we talked about the definition of conflict. Next, field theory sees conflict and its resolution as products of a field of forces. This is reflected in the works of field theorists like Lewin or Dewey. Systems theory views conflict as a system of relationships. It seeks to find out how parts of a social system, that is, social institutions, work together. Parts of social system may function, but they may also dysfunction. Just like we discussed a little while ago, that conflict has both function as well as dysfunctions. Social exchange theories have tried to apply the principles of economic exchange in markets to non-economic exchange, such as in informal interactions and group patterns. Homans, George C. Homans, analyzed interactions in terms of rewards and costs. People try to maintain the behavior that proves profitable, that gives them some gain. Now let us come to the social structural theories. What do they base their ideas on? They emphasize on the organization of society. They believe that the way society is organized or the divisions within society that are there create the causes and conditions for conflict. These would include socioeconomic aspects as well as race, religion, ethnicity, age, and gender divisions. Structural violence theory says that conflict is inherent in social structures. Social structures and institutions cause structural violence. Human needs theory, propounded by Burton, believes that human beings have certain basic or universal human needs. When those are not met, it can lead to conflict. Resource theory says that conflict is caused when one party wants the resource the other has, or when two or more parties want the same resource. Obviously, it is limited and they fight over it. Relative deprivation theory is based on the concept of deprivation, which indicates the difference between what one expects in life and what he eventually gets. It can lead to aggression and make people enter into conflict with the others. Socioeconomic theories, Karl Marx believed that structures of economic organization lay the foundation for class conflict. We will come to this in detail when we talk about the Marxist theories. Finally, the formal theories, which use mathematical language to express their core ideas. Here, social conflict is seen in terms of quantitatively expressed relationships, and conflict resolution is viewed as stability in the dynamics of these relationships. So, to sum up, we have discussed few theories which talked about the nature of humans and few theories which talked about stressed on the nurture or the environment that causes conflict. So, this nature-nurture debate becomes extremely important over here. But it has been long established that all these factors work actually together. Thank you, students.